الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله الله أكبر الله أكبر ولله الحمد الله أكبر الله أكبر.
Det var midnatt, fyllda nyårsklockornas sång.
Today we need to talk about neoconservatism. You can only understand this mass migration that took place if you understand that American foreign policy since the 1980s has been dominated by the neoconservatives, who basically committed to reshaping the Middle East in American and Israeli interests. My book deals with the neoconservative cabal who wrote a lot of Likud's manifesto in the 1990s, and the strategy that they recommended for the Israeli right, which came to power, was to sow destruction in the Middle East by toppling the secular states that dominated the Middle East, Saddam and Assad, and Egypt and Libya. What all these countries had in common was that they were dictatorships, but secular, and that meant that they had quite good rights for women, and above all they were stable. They also looked after their minorities in an offhand way. Not many people realized that Saddam's Iraq was 10% Christian and Assad's Syria was 20% Christian. They lived in relative harmony with their neighbours. What the recommendation was that if you toppled Saddam, not only would his support for the PLO cease, but the country would fall into civil war, and so much energy would be spent fighting each other they wouldn't have any time opposing Israel. So this strategy, recommended by David Wurmser and Douglas Feith, who were later to become number 2 and number 3 at the Pentagon, was basically to create havoc in the Middle East. Now, what happened in 2001 was that George Bush was elected, and he put in place a number of neoconservatives, and they were all Jews, by the way, who had planned over many years this plan to reshape the Middle East. But they didn't have the opportunity to put into place until 9/11, and what we all know in 9/11 was that the attacks were planned by the Saudi Arabian bin Laden. 15 out of the 19 hijackers were Saudi. Bin Laden's jihadists had been supported by the Americans back in the early 1980s in the Afghan war to topple the Soviet Union. The jihad had then been picked up by Saudi Arabia, and who they backed jihadism in Bosnia and Kosovo, and in Indonesia and Africa, all with the aim of promoting radical Islam. The Americans did not do this directly, but they were very close allies with the Saudis, so you could say that indirectly Americans were supporting radical Islam. But radical Islam was never a threat to Israel. and never a threat or a focus for the neoconservatives, because Israel, being a security state, was well adapted to defending itself to terrorism, whereas they were very, very threatened in their perception by Saddam and other secular states who were against the Islamists. Europe, in contrast, is very much threatened by radical Islam, but is not under threat from the secular states of the Middle East. So what happened after 9/11 was that it was a Saudi operation, basically, but the Americans blamed the Afghans, which was correct because bin Laden was based in Afghanistan. So they attacked Afghanistan, and then they attacked Iraq. Now this was totally insane because Iraq had nothing to do with 9/11. Saddam was a hostile enemy of everything to do with jihadists. He hated them because he knew that radical Islam was a potent threat to his power. But what happened was that the Americans, that's one of our friendly Muslim neighbours, radical Islam was a huge threat to Saddam, and he warned that if he was toppled, Iraq would be in total warfare and chaos. The war, anyway, went ahead on a false prospectus. It was blamed on weapons of mass destruction, which didn't exist, and it was blamed on the fact that Saddam was behind the jihad. Now, polls showed that even a year after the failed invasion, most Americans still thought that A, Saddam had nuclear weapons, and B, that he was behind 9/11. It shows you the power of the mainstream media and the American political class at promoting this very one-sided story, even though, of course, there were both sides. What happened, of course, was that Iraq collapsed and was in total secular state of civil war. 1 million Iraqis are said to have died. Iraq has been completely purged of Christians. The Saudis have supported Sunni Islam in Iraq, and the Shias are supported by Iran. So the Iraq civil war is basically a proxy war between the two hostile forces of Shia and Sunni Islam. The war then spread to Libya, which was a NATO operation. Gaddafi again was a dictator, but he had a very stable society where women had extensive rights. Libya now is a total mess, where women have no rights, and it was Hillary's operation. So if anyone's thinking of voting for Hillary Clinton, remember that. The Americans then backed the jihadists in Syria, yet another dictator who kept peace in his country, and again, now total chaos. I don't mean to exonerate Islam in any way. I think it's a wicked religion, but I think that you have to realize that the reason why a place like Skara is now overwhelmed with people from the Middle East is not to do with Islam, it's to do with geopolitics of the Middle East. It's got to do with the neoconservatives, it's got to do with Israel, it's got to do with the American army, and it's got to do with Saudi Arabia supporting chaos because they want to kill the Shias, and they're fighting back. And now we're seeing a generational war in the Middle East. It's going to be very hard to put back together again. And what you're going to continue to see is endless refugee flows to Europe, which Europe is going to have to deal with by closing the borders at some point. So all that is argued in my book, and I put the blame squarely on the Western powers, chiefly America. Britain has also been very, very supportive of jihadism in the world. And in a way, the British Brexit vote was a vote of massive self-confidence, or lack of self-confidence, in the way that the British have handled the geopolitics of the Middle East, because it's blown back, it's affected all our countries in Europe. Anyway.